Welcome back to 50 Days to Rebuild, the series where I do 50 minutes of exercise and read 50 pages of a physio book in a day. This is day 15. We are officially in week 3. How time flies when you do nothing but read all day. Before I jump into the exercise stuff for today, apologies for my voice. I am starting to get a bit sick, so I'll do what I can. With the hip bridge, I did have more difficulty than I think yesterday, but not as much as I normally would have, so I was happy about that. I think that perhaps I might need to massage the quads because I was really having trouble more with that sensation of knee extension that I felt quite helpful yesterday. Although I also didn't massage my hamstrings yesterday, so I'm not sure if that's something that I need to sort of do on a continual basis till I can get more of this activation up and then maybe ram down on it later. With the side bridge, again, I've been having trouble sort of keeping this neutral pelvis position. I feel like it jumps and strums forward into this tensor fasciae lata, so TFL activation. I did actually try and massage my TFL today. My God, is it tender. This did noticeably help. Like even when I just sit trying to sort of move to the right pelvic position, I can often feel that jumping, and it was still present, but much reduced, which has me thinking like, hey, this wasn't like the most comprehensive massage ever, so maybe it just needs more release. But perhaps also like, maybe I'm also hitting like some of the quad in that massage. I did feel like maybe that was the case. And maybe that's what needs to be addressed also. I guess, to be honest, one of the more disheartening things I've noticed since recording this like hip hinge exercise is my difficulty finding neutral. And this has been highlighted when I'm trying to sleep, when I'm walking, and just from learning what neutral really is, that a flat spine is incorrect. And I guess I kind of already knew that to some extent, but I think I didn't really understand the full extent of the lumbar curve. And I know it will be probably somewhat different for me given that I have a slipped vertebra. I might need maybe more flexion as opposed to extension. I'm both flexion and extension intolerant, but I think I'm particularly extension intolerant. I'm not 100%, but I've been trying to work on that today. Not really in the recording, it's just like in my walks and stuff today. And it's just really trying to feel my spine and be like, oh, maybe that's how I can sort of be more aware of what that spine position is. I don't know if it's not going perfectly, but it's starting to get better. Like, it basically just got triggered by watching a flat back appear in this hip hinge. It's like, oh, that's not meant to happen. So that was something I thought I'd sort of conquered. Looks like maybe that's not the case, but I'm going to keep working at that and see if I can get a more consistent feel so this is less of a problem. Jumping into what I learned today reading Ultimate Back Health and Fitness, as always starting with my investigation of stability versus mobility. There were 2 points in the book that I want to highlight here. So one where McGill argued that there is a trade-off between stability and motion. Additionally, he said that people often mistake stability as no motion occurring, and that's not accurate. It just means we have a stable joint. And again, I think this plays into this idea of it being a trade-off, and that perhaps we could get some stable movement even of the spine just under a perhaps braced load. Moving into the performance lens, I am really liking going through this. It seems to be very sort of regimented and formulaic approach of how to help people improve with different sports. So following on from the idea of how do we actually sort of identify what to work on, we want to view someone from a distance and then start breaking down the movement into the little sub-movement patterns and then the body parts that go along with that. From there, we want to see, is there a dominant plane that this force needs to be transmitted through, and what joints / multiple joints are in play here, and then use that to determine what exercises to do. There was an interesting point here that apparently if you enhance mobility, some research showed that enhanced mobility didn't translate to the athletic performance that they wanted it to. And he's arguing here it's once you do mobility, you then need to try and train the motion in some way to transfer that over. Now, if you were working with someone with pain and consulting with them, you go through that same sport process and document everything to do with the sport, but then from there you would document everything to do with the individual person and document their capabilities and their deficits to figure out what needs to be improved as the foundational stuff to then work onto the sport specific. He did say here that you could use different screening tests, but that honestly most of them were kind of crap. That none of them essentially show validity for predicting injury, and that really we can just use different like athletic exercises as tests like anything that they have to perform, we can just use as a test. But we just want to make sure that that actually matches like a mechanism that's important to them, and that we scale it to the sport. So like if we were using some form of screening test and it was like, oh, let's do a squat, and it was like, well, all these basketball players are going to fail, it doesn't mean they're not athletic. Just to do with their anatomy, basically. Just like their long femurs. Now, when we're developing these movements, he said it was really important to develop the foundational movements before we go into more specific skills. I actually found this very interesting because it sounds like a bit of a rationale for developmental neuromuscular stabilization, or DNS, which is basically like how a baby develops. They then try and get people to work through some of these different stages that they might have had go wrong or somehow had interrupted. And this was a similar argument that the guy from Anatomy Trains made, just without some of the detail around it. It's just like, do rolling and then work your way up to crawl and then stand. So yeah, I think it might be worth having a deeper dive into DNS again. From that, looking more at the injury side of things, I was happy to hear that he recommended doing something that I have been doing, or at least to some extent, one of which is to journal. So basically to say how your back feels in a day and what you've done in terms of training and activities. I'm not always that specific and I'm not as consistent every day. That's something I used to do a bit more. But I guess to some extent that's what this is as well. So that was good to hear. He said that you want to reflect on that so things get worse in the preceding days, that you can look back and be like, oh, maybe this was the trigger. He also said that if we start to encounter some issues and, like say we're doing the Omega Big 3, like in my case, and we're doing the roll and then we start hurting ourselves, it's like, okay, well, let's regress back a level. Let's just try and stay at this level till the issue resolves. And then let's reflect and look back and say, okay, what was the thing that triggered this, so that we can sort of modify things moving forward. In my case, I think that's a lack of rotational ability. So I think I need to look back at the stop twist. It's kind of like a side plank on the wall and then you do this like twisting motion, something that I did for a little while, and I think also maybe I need to develop the normal plank, because this is actually the transition, like it's a transition to the second motion, the second position, and I don't have the second position or the transition, so I think that'll be important. He also said that you can't activate what you can't feel. This is something that I used to experience with my glutes, even though I still have glute issues now. Like, I could not get them to activate for the bloody life of me, and I massaged the absolute hell out of them. I could actually start getting a bit of a squeeze. So I think maybe to some extent this sort of argues towards proprioceptive training, and perhaps like using massage as a way to get a feel, because again, this is something similar I did for like learning how to do a belly breath. It's all to do with that, generating that feeling back there again. So that might be an argument for what I need to do with the quads as well as the glutes. Lastly, I just wanted to touch on something he said to develop the optimal squat, because I think that's always very interesting. He said you want to get into a quadruped position, and then you want to try and push your your butt back to your heels with a neutral spine, and to test different knee and foot widths to see which one you can come back furthest with a neutral spine, and then use that to determine what your squat width would be. And he said that's often a lot wider than you anticipate. Yeah, that is it for day 15. Again, I'm very happy to be in week 3 and to be getting through this book and just be doing this challenge just in general. So look, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.